until our final panelist has taken a seat, and then we'll immediately kick off. So let's give it another 2 minutes and then we'll get started. Dobar dan. Welcome everybody to this very interesting panel on insect protein, a very topical issue that is also very relevant in my country, the Netherlands. My name is Koen van Ginneke. I'm the agricultural counselor at the embassy of the Netherlands here in Serbia. As I said, a very topical issue, as demand for protein in the world is rising, and at the same time we're experiencing scarcity in issues like land, water. The environmental impact of protein production is getting ever more visible. To take an example of my own country, we rely heavily on the imports of soy from South America. That is connected to deforestation. Of course, if you grow soy, you need land, and what they do there is they clear forest land, turn it into arable land, and then to meet the expectations that we have for animal protein, the protein that we feed the animals, I should say. Insect protein in that regard is very interesting because it's an alternative which is probably more sustainable. It needs fewer resources, and also important to mention that it is I would say a piece in the puzzle of the circular economy. Because you take waste, you use the waste to grow insects, you get rid of the waste, and you actually valorize the waste at the same time. So that's, I would say, two birds with one stone, as they say in English. And there are quite a few companies also that see the immense potential. To mention one of them is Protix. That's a company from the Netherlands that started working on this in 2009, if I'm not mistaken. And they mainly focus on black soldier fly. Then there's the competitor from France, Insect, with a Y, and they, I believe, are more focusing on the mealworm, but have also been active for the last decade in this particular sector. And in Serbia, it is kind of a novel. It's a new topic that is generating interest, also because of the important research that is being done here in Novi Sad. Not only in Novi Sad, but also in Temerin at the agro campus, which I visited on several occasions. And I think the question that we're to discuss here is what is the insect what is the future of insect protein in Serbia? And we have some very knowledgeable panelists with us today, two assistant professors from the University of Novi Sad, Dr. Kristovic in the middle, and Dr. Petrovic here on the left, and then someone from the industry who actually knows how it works in practice, with a lot of experience in the feed industry, Mr. Sherko on the very left. Before I start firing my questions at you, I thought it would be a good idea to do a quick round of introductions of yourselves, maybe 1 minute, 2 minutes, and also explain us what your connection is to the topic of insect protein. So maybe I can start on my left here.
Thank you very much. I'm Miloš Petrovic, and I'm assistant professor at the Department for Environmental and Plant Protection, and I work as an entomologist, and my basic connection to the insects as a food and feed is entomological role in their rearing and breeding. I started collaborating with people or professionals from Department for Animal Science a couple of years ago, and we are mainly focused on rearing insects on agricultural side streams and dangerous side stream, as a previous panel talk about rearing insects on heavily contaminated agricultural side streams. We mainly work on insect called Tenebrio molitor or yellow mealworm, but in the future we will have to, in order to be compatible with other scientists, work with black soldier fly. Why we chose Tenebrio monitor? We chose Tenebrio monitor because it is easily reared and we can use side streams which are more, let's say it, more kind to the nose, because rearing flies is not a really aromatic problem. So that's it for me.
Thank you very much, and I can attest to that. When I was at the Agro campus in Timarin, it's not the nicest smell in insect rearing. Dr. Kistovic, can I ask you to give a short introduction of yourself?
Okay, thank you. I'm assistant professor in animal nutrition, so this is my main connection to this research topic that we are doing here at University of Novi Sad, Faculty of Agriculture. And the main idea was to introduce edible insects as animal feed in our country, because so far, this will be the topic probably of this panel session, is that we don't have legislation on edible insects in Serbia, both for food and feed. So my expertise in this topic is to perform nutritional analysis and to give, let's say, some insights on how to breed differently those insects to reach the goal of getting the very good, very performative feed stuff for animal nutrition.
Thank you. Lastly, our speaker from the private sector, Mr. Sherko, can I ask you to give a short introduction of yourself?
Zahvaljujem se na pitanju. Sve proizvode od insekata, znači proteine od insekata, posmatram za sada samo teoretski kao animalna hraniva. Jer ja kad sam počeo da radim još u 20. veku, mi smo koristili mnogo animalnih hraniva. Riblje brašno, mesno koštano brašno. Ta struktura proteina, odnosno aminokiselinska struktura, je omogućavala da se proizvodnja radi sa mnogo manje aditiva nego danas. Govorimo o aminokiselinama, enzimima i tako dalje, jer smo prinuđeni da ih koristimo. Mi koristimo sada mnogo biljnih izvora proteina, kao što su soja, krompirovi proteini i tako dalje. Teoretski, ti proteini insekata bi mogli da budu za nas nutricioniste vrlo interesantni za balansiranje smeša u smislu naročito aminokiselinske strukture.
Thank you for that first interesting contribution. First, I want to go to Dr. Petrovic. You're an entomologist, which to me means you know everything there is to know about insects. Can you elaborate a little bit on the insect rearing techniques? And then, I mean, what kind of facilities? We already talked about the smell. What does it look like when you visit one of those facilities? What do you use as a feedstock? And also maybe explain a little bit about the production cycle.
Oh, that is a really interesting set of questions. I would like to start with let's say rearing techniques, and I will divide them in two separate ways. One is rearing of mealworms, and the other one is rearing of the flies. And by that means you can divide the world on two sectors. One is Europe or Northern Hemisphere, and the other one is the Southern Hemisphere, where you have Central America, South America and Africa, where they rear really big amounts of Hermetias. And when you look a picture of one rearing compound for Hermetia illucens, that is nothing special. Some old shed, or series of old sheds with a little bit of insulation, and they are rearing it really nice. Why? Because climate controlling is not so important when you have really nice climate. On the other hand, you have European producers which are investing a lot of money, moreover, in insulation of rearing compounds. Why? Because we have severe winters and we have sometimes severe springs and autumns also. And these insects are more or less, they know how to enjoy. Why? Because they are reared very well on temperatures from 26 to 29 with a 55 to 70 relative humidity. And in order to give them that microclimate, you have to insulate them. So when you take a picture, when you look a picture of an insects or proteins farm, you can see something like a spaceship. On the other hand, when you take a look on a picture from Africa, that is not a spaceship, I have to admit. When it comes to rearing techniques, more and more producers tend to rear them vertically. Why? Because you can kind of make a Lego of these trays and go 7-8 meters in height, and by that mean you have on 1 square meter, I don't know, you can produce 1,000 of kilos of mealworms. Which feeds are used for rearing insects? For mealworms, you can use, for example, wheat bran, barley bran, oat bran, etc. And for Hermetia, you can use a lot of different side streams. For example, food waste from a different kind of restaurants, different kind of canteens, etc. And that is the reason why they smell so much, because that food, when it comes to rearing Diptera or the flies, that food is boosted with microorganisms, and first the food is starting to decay and then they start to feed on it. So that is not so nice smell. When you compare Tenebrio and Hermetia, when it comes to smell, Tenebrio is aromatherapy, because Hermetia can be so severely, it can be really poisonous. And by the means of the biology, this one, I'm pointing at Tenebrio monitor, this one is from 80 to 95 days for one generation. When you take a look at the other hand, for one generation in optimal conditions for flies, you need 21 to 27 days. So when you sum it up, 3 generations of Hermetia equals 1 generation of Tenebrio. But what is the thing with this one? This one is saved as food in European Union. Hermetia is not. Hermetia is only used as a feed and in, I think, some countries.
Right, I think we'll get to the legal situation a little bit later on. Are there any other insect species that hold promise for insect protein in the future, or are these the ones?
Yes, there are 2 species from order Orthoptera, or the locusts and the crickets. But I have to admit, I haven't heard many producers in European Union, mainly because those insects are prone to virus diseases, believe it or not. And when you want to widen the production or make something new when it comes to genetic potential, you have to buy from other producer, and that is a great risk of virus being introduced. And when you introduce virus, you have catastrophe in your farm. And when it comes to locusts mainly feed on wheat, and not wheat like a wheat bran or fresh wheat plants. And when you compare, why would I give them human food to make alternative proteins? They are kind of on the edge with that.
Right. Interesting. Dr. Kristovic, moving on to you. Can you say a little bit about the nutritional quality of insect protein? Is it comparable to the more common sources of protein that we use in animal feed? Can you say something also a little bit more about the micronutrients? This is, I think, your specialty, so please enlighten us.
Yes, straight to the center, yeah. Insect protein, the most important characteristic of insect protein is certainly its sustainability, but also nutritional composition, let's say like that. Characterization of such protein is important as well. People who've heard about insects, they know it's a protein feed or food. but they don't know how much protein is there. There is about 50 to 61%, but not all of that protein is actually true protein. There are other nitrogen compounds present in the cuticule, the insect, let's say, helmet or something. Yeah,
exoskeleton.
Yeah, exoskeleton. That also contributes to the protein content. So that content is overestimated. That's a bad thing. A good thing is that there is a lot of protein and it is of high biological quality and availability because it contains all necessary amino acids that are needed for optimal diet formulations, both for animals and also for human diet. That protein contains lysine, methionine, tryptophan, like very important and very, let's say, expensive amino acids in animal nutrition formulation. Also about other similar feed or food that are present on the market, like soybean or other animal byproducts. They have similar or better insect protein has similar or better composition. With regard to other nutrients, there are very high levels of microelements like iron, zinc, manganese, magnesium, potassium, and calcium. Maybe I left out some, but this is something we checked. Yeah, and the levels are very high, but they're highly dependent on the diet of the insect. We tested a dozen of both feed and byproducts of milling industry, and there are very different levels found in larvae. Most very highly variable, especially in terms of micronutrients and also protein. Protein also varies a lot depending on maybe Milos would also can say something about entomology part in terms of larva yield, because you don't get the same volume of larvae on different feedstuffs. So the same thing is about nutritional composition.
Right. So maybe to just immediately take the issue of feedstock, that what do you see and what is the most promising? And maybe Milos, you can also a little bit pitch in on this topic. What have you found out so far in the studies?
For me, the most promising is combination of wheat bran combined with a with the combination of sprouts, yes, barley and oat sprouts, and in ratio 80% wheat bran, 10% barley sprouts, 10% oat sprouts. We tried to rear them on oat and barley, but the thing is the yield was excellent, but for one generation it was 145 days to have one generation in optimal condition. By this combination you have, for example, 92 days, but the yield is excellent. And as I remember, the nutritional composition is also excellent. And what's moreover, when you compare, for example, pupae from just wheat bran and that combination, the pupae are much larger, meaning that larger pupae means larger insects, means bigger amount of eggs at the end.
Right. Okay, Mr. Sheko, I would like to move over to you. As you informed us, you are a chief nutritionist at Ravago Chemicals, and you have extensive experience in feed processing. Can you tell us a little bit more about the challenges and opportunities of processing insect feed and integrating it into feed solutions?
Čuli ste ovdje deo odgovora. Značajno veći izazovi su pred kolegama koji su pre nas nutricionista u lancu. da bi mi koristili u industriji stočne hrane kao commodity materijal, kao uobičajeno hranivo, mora prvo da se desi standardizacija proizvoda, kako da kažem, da imamo uobičajeni standardizovan sastav proizvoda. Zatim mora dostupnost da bude stalna, transportabilnost tog proizvoda i mogućnost čuvanja, lagerovanja mora da bude utvrđena i onda dođemo do tih propisa i na kraju krajeva zdravstvena bezbednost. Sve ostalo je matematika, odnosno način optimizovanja smeša za određene vrste i kategorije životinja i što bolje iskorišćavanje potencijala takvih proizvoda. Rekao bih samo da imam izvesno iskustvo sa upotrebom ulja insekata. Stalno govorimo o proteinima, a polovina tog nekog proizvedenog materijala je mast ili ulje. Tako da uključen sam u jedan projekat u Severnoj Makedoniji gde smo radili testove u proizvodnji hrane za pse, koristili smo ulje insekata. Apsolutno nema nikakvih loših informacija, povratnih informacija. Psi vrlo rado uzimaju, palatabilnost nije ugrožena ni na koji način, tako da i to je jedna od stvari kojima se ja lično radujem, jer ostali izvori masti, ulja i biljni i tako dalje zavisi od cene goriva, benzina i tako dalje i rastu praktično stalno, a ovo bi mogla biti jedna ozbiljna alternativa.
Yes, thank you. Maybe you already mentioned it, the legislative framework. I think that is also something that deserves a little bit of attention because, and you can inform me whether I'm correct or whether I'm wrong, but I think in Serbia the use of insect protein in feed is still restricted. There are some changes along the way, and we're not really sure on when that is going to happen. I was also interested in you from a private company perspective. If you have this uncertainty, is insect protein something that you look into right now, or do you wait for the government to allow the use of insect protein and then you start looking into the possibilities?
Naša kompanija, pored proizvodnje premiksa, radi i prodaju commodity roba. Tako da, apsolutno se radujemo mogućnosti da u nekom periodu dobijemo priliku da radimo i tako nešto, jer nama su naši partneri najbitniji, pokušavamo da obezbedimo sve potrebne sirovine za njihov rad. Sad, što se tiče propisa, ja verujem da ćemo mi slediti politiku Evropske unije, samo sa zakašnjenjem. Ne vidim da ćemo mi tu imati veće restrikcije nego što će biti u perspektivi Evropskoj uniji. Mislim da su potrebna mnoga znanja u smislu bezbednosti i da se smanji taj otpor iz nepoznatog razloga za primjenu materijala, samo zato što su insekti u pitanju. Ne, mislim da to moramo mnogo više znati i sami sebe ubediti da je to bezbedno.
Right, yeah, that reluctance is also something that I recognize in my discussions, and it's not so much in feed, but particularly also in food applications, that people are saying this is definitely one bridge too far for me. You also mentioned food safety, feed safety. I wanted to ask Dr. Kristovic also whether he could address that issue a little bit, because whenever I have discussions, there's always people that say that is it safe for animal feed, and does it translate into the human food chain if we use insects as animal feed? And maybe you could also say something about potential contaminants in feedstock, what happens to it throughout the chain, and is it a risk if you have contaminated feedstock that it also ends up on our plates in the end?
Well, regarding food safety, insect products intended for human or animal consumption have pretty much the same health risks as any other animal product, like meat or milk. It's a good medium for the growth of bacteria, parasites as well, and viruses Milos mentioned before. That is, let's say, that part of biological security. On the other hand, as meat, also insects are thermally processed, like boiling, cooking, or in any other way. So microbiological contamination should be a problem for people to consume or animals to consume this. About the certain contaminants, insects are prone to contamination depending on the environment, but mostly on diet, on the feedstock. So if you have certain contaminants in, we come from the assumption that if you have contaminants in feedstock, you will have in insects. Well, it's not black and white, because some researchers before us, and Milos and I as well, did some research on feeding mealworm, yellow mealworm, feed that is contaminated with aflatoxins. We started from the worst toxin. And our first preliminary, let's say, results show that there were no aflatoxins found in larvae, and all the aflatoxin was finally in frass, which is insect feces, for those who don't know what frass is. So it is a good thing in terms of sustainability, circular economy, to use feedstuffs that are contaminated, like, I don't know if probably some of you have been on the previous panel where the producer had corn that is contaminated and we don't know what he did with it later.
Here's an idea.
But you can use it to grow insects and to give yourself added value in terms of protein and so on and so forth. So another thing that is important to mention are the allergens, because protein by itself, it can be an allergen, especially if you have heating, like any other, let's say, sea floor animals like crabs or seashells, and people who are usually allergic to those animals are allergic to insects, but it's not a rule, but they are usually allergic. Of course, there are some parasites that are particularly interesting in mealworm, because people can get those parasites from flour, because mealworms usually live in flour. And if you don't thermally process that flour, like making crepes or pancakes, if you're in the US, you can get those parasites as well. So you don't know you ate insect parasites. But you probably did.
Yeah, very interesting. Also, the what you mentioned about the aflatoxins and the ability of insects to sort of clean your feedstock. And I think that's also that I was in short sidestep, but I was in Wageningen University about 6 months ago, and they're also doing a lot of research on the potential of cleaning of the feedstock by insects, and it's a very promising line of research that I think that deserves further attention. That brings me also to my next question. That I think we already saw a slide, Dr. Kisevic, about the wormcraft. That is, I think, what you call the research team here in Novi Sad, to further look into insect protein. Can you tell us a little bit what the research agenda is? What are you focusing on for the, next 1 to 5 years? And which are the knowledge gaps that you particularly want to fill in the time to come?
Well, first, we need to introduce technology here in Serbia. That is the first thing, in rearing, in processing, in entire circle of production, from rearing, processing to utilization, and introduction in animal diet. Introduction in animal diet will be probably the easiest job, because we already have nutritionists, and they observe insects as any other feed material. But the problem is how to process them to become such feed material that can be used in. So at this moment we are doing research on, let's say, mass farming of insects. We are introducing another insect species here that's like soldier fly, Milos mentioned before. Right now we're talking with Wageningen University about using some compounds from black soldier fly to reduce heat stress in poultry.
Right.
This is one thing. Another thing is aflatoxins. We are now broadening this subject by employing other mycotoxins. At this moment, one experiment is in progress, that is with deoxynivalenol and zearalenol, both very interesting here in Serbia because they are fusarium mycotoxins. And pretty much, Milos maybe has another thing.
Yes, I have one additional experiment which is really interesting, and it is related to our colleague Sherko note, and that is related to storing. And why storing? Because during the storing there are possible contaminants from insecta which can use edible insects which are stored, dried and processed as a food. So we wanted to test out which of the species in a wide range of stored product species can use this interesting substrate. Why I say interesting? Because it is combination of proteins, fat, etc. as a feed. And unfortunately for us, which are related to this topic, we found really cosmopolitan species which can use this as a food. And I forgot to bring those jars. They are also interesting. I got this one as a really interesting stage, but unfortunately for us, we found insects which can use this protein source as a food.
Okay, very interesting. And I wanted to add one thing. We already touched upon the topic of FRAS.
Yes.
Is that also something, because I read a lot of things about the potential of FRAS as organic fertilizer, something that could be a game changer, or at least that's what some people write. Is there also some research going into the potential of using FRAS in agriculture? I mean, that would be also very interesting to countries that have a smaller livestock sector, which is, I think, everywhere in this area of the world.
When it comes to FRAS, for me, that is top priority for us to use. Why? Because when you start mass farming insects, you can see that wheat bran is becoming FRAS in mass. And we are now kind of sharing between us, okay, you can take this and fertilize your apples, you can take this and fertilize your tomato, but after mass farming, you can see the potential of that FRAS being transferred into pellets and then deployed as a normal manure fertilizer on the fields. And we would like to address that. That is the second most important product when it comes to rearing insects, and that is the FRAS, or the organic material. You can use it as a substitute for example, cow manure.
Mm-hmm. And do you see interest from private sector companies in this area as well, that they want to collaborate with you to see what they can do?
When it comes to collaboration, the private sector is mostly focused on keeping track of the data during the rearing process in order to optimize temperature, humidity, emission of the methane, ammonia, etc. They are now focused on that. When it comes to some big private sector, big companies from private sector which are related to the agriculture, for now on, we didn't have so many questions. Moreover, they are companies from technological point of view where they want to optimize the production. When to, for example, turn on the ventilator during the farming process, when to heat it up, put the temperature down, humidify, etc.
Right. Okay. Thank you very much for that explanation. Maybe a question to all three of you. In the hypothetical situation where legislative changes are being made and it's possible to introduce certain sources of insect protein in animal feed and also in food, Where do you see this industry going in the next 5 to 10 years? And maybe I can start with Mr. Sherko. Do you see this playing a big role in the feed industry in let's say 10 years, or is this just a hype that we're talking about and then it will disappear again?
Pokušat ću da sasvim uprostim odgovor. Da bi industrija stočne hrane koristila proizvode od insekata, sama proizvodnja insekata mora postati industrijska. Mislim da je to ključna stvar i da posluje po svim postulatima industrije sa svojim standardima, propisanim kvalitetom i tako dalje. Što se tiče otpora koji su očekivani, jel da, koji mogu biti etički ili moralni ili već ne znam kakvi, mislim da će toga biti mnogo manje u industriji stočne hrane gde je ključna stvar cena. Mi kao industrija stočne hrane moramo da obezbedimo profit i sebi i našim partnerima, farmerima. I mislim da će tu ta vrsta otpora biti mnogo manja. A u industriji hrane prosto zavisit će mnogo sigurno od marketinga i pristupu kupcima. Naravno da to nije moja struka i ne mogu da imam nekako jako utemeljeno mišljenje, ali da će biti otpora te nekakve kulturološke prirode, to sam siguran, većih nego u industriji stočne hrane.
Kirstovic, maybe you'd like to pitch in. Do you agree with the vision shared with your neighbor?
I absolutely agree. I just wanted to add another point of view about food. That's only my opinion. I think food is going to boom after legislation goes in force here in Serbia, not on a level that you are going to buy on every corner a burger from insect, yeah, but in terms of delicacy, because there are many exhibitionists or people that want to try new things. So I expect many exquisite products on the market.
But it will remain niche more than rather than
something like that. Something like that. And it will be maybe for younger generation a kind of trend to try something like this.
Of course, we don't want it to try. We want to continue to.
Absolutely. But I think this will be the first maybe thing that I will do. Of course, in terms of animal nutrition, I think that there will be many interested farmers to produce, because there already are, and they're calling us and asking how can we produce, what to do with it, then can we sell it, can we use it. So I think there will be, there already is, there are stakeholders for this, for instance, production.
And maybe there's also some interest in the future from the bigger companies that I referenced in the beginning. I know that companies from the Netherlands are also looking at production sites outside of the Netherlands. I think that they have a particular interest in Central and Eastern Europe. So if the legislative framework adapts to what we have in the EU, that might also attract foreign investors to see what the possibilities are in Serbia.
Yes, sir.
Maybe you want to...
For me, I think the answer is somewhere in the middle of Sasha's and Edward's. And for me, in the next 5 years, I think the pet food industry will boom. And you can see already on the market in Serbia that you have some treats or some dog food which contains some % of the insects. And for me, that is something interesting, because when it comes to food, you have that yuck factor. When it comes to pet industry, why would not your Lagotto Romagnolo, Bichon or Jack Russell Terrier eat insects instead of, I don't know, tuna or anchovy or sardine meat? For me, that is the most promising thing to point out, that I think the cats and dogs in the future will eat a lot of insects, more than humans. And I cannot also compare the feed industry. I would like in the future, in order to, I don't know, eat shrimps which did not use fish meal. They used, I don't know, Hermetier lucens meal. But in Europe, I think the pet food industry is top target for the alternative proteins like this.
I think Mr. Sheko also referenced to it already. I saw you raising up. Do you want to add something here on this particular issue of pet food?
Da, dodao bih da je pet industrija i po svojim propisima već ispred ostalih industrija koje smo pominjali i ono što je jako interesantno što su ranije naše kolege, mladi naučnici spominjali, tu je ključna stvar dokaz da proteini insekata neće izazivati alergije kod pasa. Sama ta činjenica će proširiti polje primene u pet industriji, jer znamo da mnogo rasa pasa ima probleme sa alergijama i tako dalje, isto važi za mačke. Dodao bih da pored pet industrije ja očekujem, ukoliko cene budu prihvatljive, da će i aquafeed industrija moći da ih primeni u većem obimu, jer je to nekako i prirodna hrana ribama i tu ne vidim da će biti bilo kakvih problema i otpora. Samo je tu pitanje koliko će biti cena konkurentna u odnosu na druge izvore proteina.
Yes, price is always important, competitiveness. If you don't have a competitive product, you're nowhere in the market, of course. Thank you very much for your addition. I think with about a little bit more than 15 minutes left, it's time to open up to our audience and see if there's some questions for you to clarify. So if anyone wants to raise a question, please raise your hand. Here in the front of you.
Hvala. Doduše, zanima me jako ishrana, odnosno korišćenje alternativnih proteina, prvenstveno insekata u ishrani ljudi, pa me tu sada malo popkaju neke stvari, a sada imamo ovde stručnjake, izvinite, nisam se predstavio, dolazim iz ove institucije Poljoprivrednog fakulteta u Novom Sadu, ali generalno me ova priča zanima, se bavim pčelarstvom usput. Sada, šta me konkretno zanima? Insekti se koriste kao hrana za ljude u nekim delovima svijeta, da budemo jasni, ali to je gledano na ukupnu planetu jako mali broj ljudi. Ako sada posmatramo Evropljane, pa i veći deo sveta, tu postoji neka razlika od bar 3-4 hiljade godina od kako insekti više nisu u nekoj redovnoj ishrani ljudi. Nekada smo i dok smo živeli u pećinama i bili sakupljači koristili bez dana. Da li postoje neka ozbiljnija istraživanja o nekom utjecaju uslovno štetnom insekata na ljudsko zdravlje ukoliko se budu koristili bez obzira kao hrana ili kao hranivo za životinje? Da li je možda tu nekih istraživanja bilo? Možda nije sad da utorim taj, ali me generalno zanima, niti ne mislim da pravim lošu reklamu za to, ali imao bi posle još jedno pitanje vezano upravo za insekte.
Pa malo ste nam pokvarili našu kuću od karata sada. Šalom na stranu, ja iskreno da kažem nisam video takve publikacije. Ono gde sam pročitao relativno velik broj publikacija su publikacije koje se odnose na alergije kod ljudi. I to je obično negde u korelaciji ko je alergičan, kao što je Saša rekao, na dagnje, ostrige, škampe, vrlo verovatno će da odreaguje i na insekte, ali u samoj toj štetnoj situaciji kod ljudi nisam viđao. Ali kod životinja smo našli, Saša i ja, jedno i dve publikacije koje su, pa možda stare, jedno 10-11 godina. Hoću da kažem, napisane su pre nego što je ova priča postala boom. I ima publikacija koja se odnosi na ishranu ćurki brašnom koja je napravljena od vrste Alphitobius diaperinus. Vrsta koja je 2023. postala zvanično bezbedna za ljudsku ishranu, ali to su ogledi koji su, vraća se sad na Edwardove reči, bili nestandardizovani. Znači, ljudi su uzeli iz kontaminirane farme kokošaka i maga Alphitobius diaperinusa, oni ga sami uzgojili, oni ga sami pripremili, predstavili kao jednu komponentu u hranidbenoj smeši i tu su pojavili problemi na tkivu creva. Zašto? Zato što nisu dobro samljali brašno. To je jedna stvar i pravili su brašno od larvi i odraslih. Znači, kombinacija koja se trenutno u industriji apsolutno nikada ne radi. Znači, kada se govori o alternativnim izvorima proteina, uvek se govori samo o larvama, mislim na tenebrionide. U tom radu su mešali odrasle i larve i tu je bilo problema. Zašto? Zato što odrasli imaju trnaste izraštaje koje u potpunosti mogu da oštete tkivo. Sad da se vratim na ovo vaše prvo zapažanje, kada se govori o upotrebi u tim nekim dalekim državama, obično kada se insekti predstave spremljeni celi, znači bez mlevenja, insektima se skidaju noge. Zato što noge imaju trnaste izraštaje koje vi, ukoliko ne sažvaćete dobro, vrlo verovatno će vam se zakačiti ovde i to, ajde što će da nervira, ali to može da napravi drugi problem.
Sličan problem imamo i kad jedemo ribu, nije to?
Da.
Ja ću samo da kratko dodam na sve ovo. Evropska unija je 2018. godine i kasnije 2020. godine izdala 2 mišljenja koje mogu naravno da se odu na sajt EFSE, odnosno Evropske agencije za bezbednost hrane, gde su urađena studija da se vidi svi mogući, nepovoljni uticaji na zdravlje ljudi i životinje, dakle toksikološki, ali i ovi biološki, kada su u pitanju virusi, paraziti, gljive, alergije i sve ostalo. Ta studija nije velika, možete da pročitate, mislim da je 20-30 strana, onako lepo sumirano i vidi se da su alergije zapravo, ako ne jedini, ali možda jedan od manjih, jedini koji može da bude problem zapravo ljudima i životinjama. Kad su životinje u pitanju, to su pre svega kućni ljubimci, ako ljudi znamo već da alergije znaju da budu značajan faktor. Tako da u principu toksikološke studije na mikotoksinima i studije na teškim metalima ne pokazuju nikakve neuobičajeno toksične efekte insekata. Kad kažem neuobičajeno, isto kao i da jedete svinjsko meso ili goveđe meso, u tom smislu. Mnogo su manji, recimo, kad su u pitanju teški metali, veće rizik nosi riblje meso, naročito morske ribe, nego insekti.
Hvala.
I ono što bi možda mogao da dodam kao jednu interesantnu stvar, pošto smo mi delovi ovog wormcrafta, moram da navedem činjenicu alergije kada se jede. Ali, evo, Marko je tu i on zna, Marko je krenuo da se bavi insektima pre 3 godine i kada smo krenuli da se bavimo, Marko dođe, stavi laboratorijski mantil i stavi on kutiju i krene da prosejava i ono leti prašina, Marko tu ništa ne smete. Sada, Marko, kada vidite, ima i dalje laboratorijski mantil, ali ima masku sa 2 filtera i ima zaštitu na oči zato što je postao u principu osetljiv na prašinu koja nastaje u toku proizvodnje. I to je ono što ljudi ne znaju, jer ko se bavio da može da proizvede 300-400 kila mesa od insekata, ali to je zapravo jedna od, po meni, većih problema u samoj proizvodnji. I kad god gledate promotivne snimke koje se odnose na proizvodnju insekata, mahom svi imaju ozbiljnu zaštitnu opremu. Ne zato što su isparenja bogata amonijakom ili metanom, ne, zato što je ta prašina izuzetno nezgodan alergen.
To je jasno, insekti imaju i dlačice na sebi i tako dalje, sve to ispada, sve to može da bude iritantno. Sad da imaš neko pitanje, ja bi još jedno imao samo...
Ima. Možeš?
Može.
Sad ja.
Shvatila sam da možemo da imamo prevodioce, više nas je verovatno koji smo na srpskom, pa nije problem. Ja sam sa ovog fakulteta, moje ime je Vesna Rodić, sa Departmana za ekonomiku poljoprivrede. Izvinjavam se ako sam propustila deo onog što je panel već pokrio, jer mi pokušavamo u paraleli da budemo i na naučnom delu simpozijuma i na panelu, pa možda dupliram nešto. Ali postoji nešto što u ekonomiji istraživanjima tržišta zovu prvo willingness to accept, a onda willingness to pay. I ja uvek kažem, nauka je u mnogim oblastima napravila sjajna dostignuća kada je u pitanju fundamentalna nauka, jer da se nađu za nešto rešenja, pa čak i tehničko-tehnološke nauke. Onda gde padnu rešenja je zapravo nepripremljenost tržišta da nešto prihvati ili ta ekonomska opravdanost koja na kraju se pokaže, bilo bi sjajno kad bi bilo jeftino, ali nije. Čula sam da je bilo i na mikotoksinima takve vrste rasprave. U svakom slučaju ja nešto mislim, ovo što Ivan pomenuo, prošle su 1000 godina od kada je stanovništvo na ovom prostoru jelo insekte i mislim da će proći bar 10 godina dok mi prihvatimo ideju da jedemo insekte i negde mi se čini da ćemo kad to prođe kroz životinju, pa kroz njenu jetru, njen digestivni trakt, mi nekako ljudi to lakše savladati nego da baš mi uzmemo. Neko je pričao pre neki dan o čokoladi sa insektima, pa lepo krcka, ali ako znate šta to krcka, ja se bojim da je naše stanovništvo i naši potrošači malo na to osetljivi. U tom smislu, ja zaista pozdravljam, čak moram da priznam, nisam ni znala za ovu Von Kraft grupu koja je okupljena oko tog da nešto što je zaista top tema u evropskim razmerama radi i kod nas, ali negde mislim da bi morale da krenu kampanje, podizanje nivoa svesti, kako bismo mi kod našeg stanovništva zapravo tu pripremljenost da takvo nešto imamo uopšte u hrani, jer ja verujem da će zakonodavac ići u pravcu rešenja da to bude obeleženo na proizvodu. Dakle, potrošač mora znati da mu se tamo nalaze kako god samleveni ili u kakvoj god formi pripremljeni insekti, a i da je životinja hranjena, da je u tim smešama bilo insekata. Tako da mislim da bi negde u paraleli morali da idu te kampanje podizanje nivoa svesti, to što je malo pre kolega Bogdanović sa Zemunskog fakulteta rekao na onom drugom delu skupa, da praktično imate jednu negativnu kampanju ka stočarskoj proizvodnji, ka jednom ozbiljnom zagađivaču i tako dalje, gomila tih veganskih pokreta i sve ostalo. Negde mislim da treba iskoristiti taj prostor, da se sad već priprema domaće tržište za to da se time rešavaju neki dugoročni problemi održivosti poljoprivrede i uopšte ekonomije i tako dalje. I onda mislim da su šanse da ovako nešto kao talasa zapada nas zapljusne sa manje nagutane vode. U principu to nam se dešavalo sa nekim drugim talasima koji su nas zapljuskivali. Eto, toliko.
Ono što moram da dodam kao komentar ovde, isto ovakve, nazovimo ih tacne, smo nosili na sajmove u sklopu prezentacije našeg fakulteta. I sad na tim sajmovima dolazi omladina, ali dolaze i deca. I jedan dečak je došao sa svojim dekom, pa jedno 75 do 78 godina. I sad taj dečačić je pitao zašto mi ovo koristimo, da li on to može da koristi za pecanje. I ja naravno njemu objasnim da se na ovo baš i neće napecati, ali da mi to na neki način gledamo kao alternativni izvori proteina. I taj gospodin je rekao, insekti, pa to ti je prevaziđeno. I onda odlazim kući, iznenađen zašto je on meni rekao insekti, to ti je prevaziđeno, i pričam s mojim dedom koji je bio 1930. godine, koji je preživeo Drugi svetski rat. I preživeo je apsolutno sve moguće i nemoguće nedaće Drugog svetskog rata i onda su rekli žablji bataci njima bili specijalitet. Sad ovde kada pitali ljude ko bi jeo žablje batake, evo Dobrila već kaže nemoj Miloše, molim te. Šalu na stranu, narednih, trenutno mislim da je posle cele ove situacije sa pripremom terena, prvo korona, pa onda i vakcine i tako dalje, sada ući u priču da ljudima nudite, dobar dan, jer vi hoćete da jedete insekte, a oni su čuli da je to sa zlog zapada, naravno gospodin mi neće zameriti, sam to tako rekao, ali takva je situacija kod nas, da dolazi na neki način to kao alternativni izvor proteina, trenutno ja mislim da ne bi u naredne 2-3 godine išao u tom pravcu da se promoviše kao food, ali kao feed bez problema. To mi je čak bio simpatičan komentar jednog momka sa stočarskog smera koji je rekao, si sad otkrio toplu vodu što ćeš kokoški da daš crva da jede. I to je ono što je meni bio zapravo pogodak, da, ali da sam njemu rekao, hoćeš da jedeš umesto Nestleovog kranča, da se unutra umesto šta već krcka u Nestleovom kranču stavi insekte, tu mislim da ne bi baš rekao, si otkrio toplu vodu. I tu čokoladu što ste čuli, tu čokoladu smo napravili za sajam tehnike koji se održao u maju ove godine u Beogradu. I to smo napravili u saradnji sa ozbiljnom firmom koja se nalazi na izlasku iz Novog Sada, Berry Calabout, evo možete da je vidite ovde. I mogu da vam kažem da je bilo ljudi koji su videli insekte i namirisali su oni da se insekti nalazi u čokoladi, ali su bez problema uzeli i pojeli. I sad recimo 50-50 je bilo ne mogu da verujem da sam pojeo insekte ili kao nije ništa posebno. I to je ono što moram da kažem, da kada probate, na primjer, ove skuvane insekte, ja verujem kada se prevaziđe taj moment, odbojno mi je, da mahom ljudi kažu, koliko smo pričali, sat vremena smo pričali o tome, ja probao ovo ništa posebno. I još kada na to sve osušite insekte koji dobiju teksturu kao neki flips ili kao neki, nazovimo to, smoki, koji ima ukus sličan suncokretu, stvarno je velika pompa, a ukus nije toliko, Bog zna kako, interesantan. I pre svega zato što se oni hrane hranom koja je neutralna u ukusu. I tu jednostavno ne možemo da očekujemo neku interesantnu priču. Ovde s nama je kolega koji će sutra da brani master na, reći ćeš mi u kom smeru, Kosta? Na gastronomiji, koji je u sklopu svog mastera pravio kolače i hleb sa 5, 10, 15 i 20% brašna, baš ove vrste. Ja sam mu dao bio 1 kilu našeg tenebrija. I kada je napravio svog ogled, donao nam je te svoje kolačiće 5, 10, 15 i 20% i probali smo, i ja sam dao kolegama u kancelariji i nisam im rekao šta jedu. I samo jedna koleginica je rekla da taj kolačić koji je bio najtamniji ili koji je imao najveći procenat brašna ima neki čudan miris. I onda kada je Kosta rekao, baš mi se oseti na ribu. Ali zapravo niko nije mogao da primeti. Bio je jednostavno čudan ukus i tačka. Ali da se sad tu nasluti da su insekti, Kosta i ti si verovatno imao takve iskustva. Sad sa hlebom ne znam kako si prošao.
Imat ćemo sad za neki.
Vidim, nabio si mišiće malo, to je okej.
Imat ćemo degustaciju za jedno pola meseca na Finsku, pa ćemo vidjeti šta je sa parima.
Onda će nas Kosta zvati pa ćemo ići da vidimo kako je on to umesio.
Malo ste već pričali o ulaznim materijama koje služe proizvodnji, sad možemo reći proizvodnji insekata za to. Koje su mogućnosti i da li se tako nešto razmatra? Pretpostavljam da se razmatra, ali nisam čitao trenutno u koliko meri upotrebu svih otpadnih stvari iz naše kuhinje, koja je trenutno pretpostavljena samo na nivou Evrope, verovatno svakog dana nekoliko hiljada tona ili nekoliko desetina hiljada tona o tome. Kako se to i da li se može?
Baš to što ste rekli nije hrana ove vrste, ali baš to što ste rekli je hrana ove druge vrste koje smo spominjali, to je ta, pravi prevod je crna vojnička muva, ili ti black soldier fly, ili mi najčešće zovemo ili BSF ili hermecija. Ona bez problema to jede. Ali tu je problem što, ja mislim, Adriana, jesi ti išla u Južnoafričku republiku da osjetiš to? Mentor, ja mislim, je li Snežana bila tvoj mentor? Nije ni važno. U svakom slučaju, koleginica, profesorica sa PMF-a je išla da posjeti jednu takvu farmu i ta farma je izolovana 4-5 km od bilo kog naseljenog mesta. Ne zato što je nešto specijalno, problem je neprijatan miris. Jer praktično vi koristite pomije za uzgoj insekata. Savršeno se razvijaju, ali jako se oseti. I u toj priči, recimo, dolazimo do problema sa standardizacijom. Vi ste jedan dan jeli, na primjer, paprikaš, ostalo vam je paprikaš. Sledeći dan ste jeli svinjsko pečenje, ostalo vam je pečenje. Sledeći dan ste jeli gomboce i to su 3 tipa hrane za tog insekta. I na kraju ste vi uspeli da uzgojite larve na gombocama, nadam se da se sad neće ljudima smučiti gomboce. Uspeli ste da uzgojite larve sa gombocama, ali ovo što je Saša rekao, njihov nutritivni sastav neće sigurno biti isti kao da su jeli ostatke od svinjskog pečenja, na primjer. I tu je zapravo potrebna ta standardizacija. Naše kolege sa entomologije su koristili to brašno, pazite sad ovo, u uzgoju komaraca. Zašto uzgoju komaraca? Radili su ogled gde se uzgajaju komarci, koriste se mužjaci koji se sterilišu, puštaju u prirodnu sredinu. Jedan ogled im je savršeno uspeo. Drugi ogled im je savršen uspeo, treći ogled komarci nisu hteli da jedu tu hranu. I onda su oni sami došli do zaključka da je vrlo verovatno jedan put je jeo jednu hranu, drugi put je jeo drugu hranu, treći put nije jeo to, ogled im je zbog toga nije uspeo. I tu je, kod baš te muve je to problem. Kod ove vrste i, kao što je gospodin rekao, i Protix, i Tebrio iz Španije, i Insects imaju svoje kombinacije koje su standardne i oni, bar tako kažu, mogu da garantuju za standardizaciju. Kod druge vrste, baš ovo je problem.
Upravo pitan zato da ne bude da platimo 2 dinara, dobijemo 1 na kraju, to je cela priča.
So, I realize that I'm, due to interpretation, a little bit behind, and keeping an eye on the clock was one of my main tasks, and I see it ticking down to almost 0. So I think we can conclude that we had a very interesting conversation about the potential of insect protein in the future. Pet industry, aquaculture seem very promising, but there's also, as the lady in the corner mentioned, the readiness to accept, particularly in terms of food and animal human consumption, I should say. I think all in all very useful, but there's certainly much more to talk about, which I suggest we use the break for. With that, thank you for your questions, and of course a big thank you to our panelists. Thank you very much for being here. Thank you.